The galaxy had never seen a celebration like this. The corridors of the Zyrothi High Council shimmered with crystal light, reflecting off tall, angular walls carved from translucent minerals that glowed faintly from within. Delegates from countless star systems floated across the polished floors, their movements graceful, yet purposeful. Among the crowd, human observers stood awkwardly, unaccustomed to zero-gravity diplomacy, clutching their small communicators and trying to make polite conversation. The event was meant to celebrate peace, yet beneath the glittering grandeur, something unspoken simmered. The youngest princess of the Zarathi Empire, Larusha, stood at the center of the hall. Her skin glimmered with a pale silver-blue hue, and her eyes, deep violet, seemed to flicker like distant nebulae whenever she moved. She had been the focus of countless political whispers and courtly jokes for years. Infertility, a condition rare among her people, had become the cruel hallmark of her public image. Nobles whispered behind her back, claiming she was unfit for leadership, unworthy of marriage, and a cautionary tale to the empire. Larusha had learned to walk with her chin high, but inside, a quiet storm of frustration and sorrow churned. Today, she would be paraded before a human as a diplomatic jest, the latest chapter in a life that had often felt more like theater than reality. Captain Marcus Hale arrived aboard the ceremonial platform in a modest human vessel, far smaller and less ornate than the luxurious ships of the Zyrothi. He had spent years exploring the stars, mapping uncharted systems, and mediating disputes between fledgling colonies. He was known among humans for his calm demeanor and quick thinking, but he was little more than a curiosity to the Zarathi. And now, according to the High Council, he was to receive the gift of Princess Larusha. The council expected laughter, perhaps embarrassment, certainly humiliation. None of them expected dignity. The moment Larusha was ushered forward, the whispers erupted. Many Zarathi delegates leaned over the polished railing of the observation deck, their elongated fingers tapping in suppressed amusement. "It will be interesting," one noble murmured to another, their tones sharp with mockery. "You will see that even a human cannot marry an infertile princess." Larusha's gaze met Marcus's for the first time. She expected him to recoil, or look perplexed. Instead, he nodded politely and stepped forward with the calm precision of someone who had faced far stranger circumstances than a royal joke. He did not bow excessively, nor did he smirk at her reputed condition. He simply offered a steady hand in greeting, and that single gesture unsettled the council more than anything else could have. "I am Captain Marcus Hale," he said. His voice was quiet, yet firm. "It is an honor to meet you, Princess." The words were simple, but they carried weight. They were not pity, not mockery. They were acknowledgement, a recognition that Larusha existed as herself, not as a symbol of failure. She had not expected that, and for a moment, she felt the icy walls of centuries of ridicule begin to melt. "Captain," she replied, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest, "I will accompany you, as the council has decreed." There was a formal quality to her words, but the faint quiver betrayed the stirrings of curiosity and perhaps hope. The crowd held its collective breath as the ceremonial transfer took place. The council's eyes glittered with anticipation of scandal, yet none came. Larusha stepped into Marcus's vessel with a grace that seemed almost casual, her long robes trailing like liquid silver across the floor. Marcus offered her a place near the command station, explaining the simple layout of the ship and the essentials of life aboard. "Everything here is yours," he said. "This is not a cage. You have freedom." Freedom. The word reverberated in her mind. She had never truly known freedom within the rigid confines of the royal court, where every movement, every glance, every word was measured against the expectations of an empire. Here, in the modest cabin of a human ship, she could breathe without pretense, without judgment. As the vessel disengaged from the ceremonial dock, gliding silently into the vast expanse of space, Larusha found herself staring through the observation window. Stars stretched infinitely in all directions, distant suns burning with silent intensity. It was unlike anything she had ever seen in the rigidly controlled views of her palace chambers. She felt small, yet strangely liberated. "Where are we going?" she asked, after a long silence. Somewhere between stars, Marcus replied with a half-smile. Somewhere the galaxy forgets its politics for a while. She allowed herself a faint smile in return. She had been given as a joke, humiliated by the council for her condition, and yet here she was, traveling freely with a human who treated her as a person. It was an unfamiliar sensation, thrilling and unsettling at once. Over the next several days, Leorosha began to observe the humans aboard the ship. The crew was diverse, composed of individuals from various planets, cultures, and backgrounds. There was humor in their conversations, a warmth she had rarely encountered in the stiff halls of her palace. She watched as they solved problems creatively, often relying on intuition rather than rigid protocols. It was messy, chaotic even, but there was life in it, and a spark of resilience that the Zarathi often lacked in their structured perfection. For his part, treated her with consistent respect. He asked her opinions on matters, included her in decisions, and made no assumptions about her abilities or desires. Larusha found herself opening up in ways she had not imagined possible. She shared stories of her childhood, the endless treatments for infertility, the pressures of royal duties, and the loneliness that accompanied them. Marcus listened without judgment, nodding thoughtfully, occasionally offering insights drawn from his own experiences exploring remote planets and encountering life in all forms. One evening, as the ship glided past a vibrant nebula, Larusha stood near the observation deck, watching the swirling colors. Marcus approached quietly, carrying 2 cups of a steaming beverage. He handed her one, and she accepted it with a nod of thanks. "You've seen much of the galaxy?" she said softly. "Do humans really survive in such chaos?" Marcus chuckled. "We do more than survive. We adapt. We build. We grow. Even when things seem impossible, we find a way forward. I think you'll find that it's not chaos. It's life." Larusha considered his words, letting them sink in. For centuries, she had believed herself a failure, bound by the rigid expectations of her empire. Yet here, in the vast emptiness of space, she felt a faint stir of possibility. Perhaps she was more than what the council had declared. Perhaps she could be more than her condition. Their journey was not without tension. Zarathi watchers monitored them from distant stations, waiting for any sign of impropriety, any hint that the princess was being treated as anything other than a pawn. But Marcus's quiet steadiness, combined with the crew's resourcefulness, kept them beyond immediate scrutiny. Larusha began to notice small details. The way humans cooperated without hierarchy, the way they celebrated minor victories, and how they found joy in simplicity. It was a revelation to her, one that contrasted sharply with the rigid political maneuverings of her court. Days turned into weeks, and the initial novelty of freedom became a daily revelation. Larusha explored the ship's research labs. He interacted with alien specimens collected during previous missions, and even assisted in minor navigational tasks. Marcus encouraged her curiosity, explaining the science behind stellar phenomena and the delicate balance of ecosystems on planets they passed. She felt useful, competent, and valued emotions she had rarely experienced in her royal life. One evening, as the stars outside the observation window stretched into long, glowing trails, Larusha spoke quietly. "I never thought I would be treated like this, like I matter." Marcus looked at her, his expression calm and unwavering. "You matter. Not because of politics, not because of titles, not because of what anyone expects. You matter because you exist and you are willing to try." For the first time in her life, Larusha felt hope, not the faint, cautious hope that came with the promise of political favor, but a genuine, unshakable hope that she could define her own path. She realized that being given as a joke was not the end of her story. In fact, it might be the beginning of something entirely new. As the ship sailed silently through the uncharted reaches of the galaxy, the princess and the human captain found themselves bound, not by obligation, but by mutual respect and quiet friendship. The stars outside the viewport seemed endless, and for the first time, Larusha believed that perhaps she could explore not only the universe but the possibilities of her own life. The High Council had intended to humiliate her, to make her a spectacle for their amusement. Instead, they had unwittingly set her on a course toward freedom, understanding, and perhaps something even more remarkable. And as she stood there, watching the endless, glittering expanse of space, she allowed herself to imagine a life not defined by what she lacked, but by what she could achieve. The galaxy was vast, and Liarusha, once a pawn, now felt like an explorer in her own right. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the human vessel, she realized that for the first time in her life, she was not afraid to dream. The human ship sailed steadily through the endless expanse of stars. Liarusha had grown accustomed to the quiet rhythm of life aboard. Each day brought new sights, new discoveries, and new interactions with the crew. She watched the humans work. Together, their conversations filled with laughter, questions, and occasional disagreements, none of which ever turned cruel or mocking. It was a strange kind of harmony, chaotic at times, but comforting in its warmth. Lyra Shaw spent most of her time in the observation deck or the research labs. She had never been so close to so many alien specimens before. Plants from distant planets, small creatures captured for study, and minerals with colors humans had never seen danced in containers under soft lights. She often found herself lost in fascination, watching how the crew cared for each creature, how they measured, recorded, and theorized. It reminded her that life was not just about appearances or status. It was about growth, understanding, and care. One afternoon, Marcus entered the lab where Liarusha was examining a small, translucent plant from a planet near the outer rim. Its tendrils glowed faintly, pulsing with light. "You're studying that one again?" he asked with a small smile. Liarusha looked up, her violet eyes bright with curiosity. "It reacts to touch," she explained. "I have observed that its color changes depending on how it is handled. I think it communicates." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Humans believe that life speaks in many forms. Some we can understand, some we cannot. You have a gift for noticing things others might miss. It is valuable. The compliment surprised her. Few in her life had ever acknowledged her abilities without hidden criticism. She nodded quietly, absorbing the words. The next days were filled with more discoveries. Liarusha learned to operate small equipment, assisted in mapping stellar phenomena, even suggested minor adjustments to navigation based on her observations. Marcus often included her in crew meetings, asking her opinion on potential paths. Through uncharted systems or on scientific readings from previous explorations, each time she contributed, she noticed a subtle change in her self-confidence, replacing doubt, curiosity replacing fear, and a quiet sense of belonging where there had once been isolation. Yet, the shadow of the Zerothi Empire always lingered. Though far away, their agents monitored the ship from remote outposts, waiting for any sign of scandal or disobedience. Liarusha knew that, despite the freedom she had, she was still being watched. It was a reminder that her journey was more than personal. It was political. One evening, as the ship passed near a luminous nebula, Liarusha and Marcus stood on the observation deck. The colors swirled in waves of pink, gold, and violet, reflecting in their eyes. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "It is," Marcus agreed. "And it reminds me that there is so much out there we do not yet understand. Every star, every planet, every life form is a story waiting to be told, or we are lucky to witness." Liarusha nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She had spent years confined by the rigid expectations of her empire, never imagining that there was a universe so vast, so full of possibilities. The nebula seemed to pulse with promise, and she felt a stirring of hope that she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time. As the ship continued its journey, they encountered an uncharted system with a planet that immediately drew their attention. It was covered in strange forests that glowed faintly in the darkness, and rivers of light ran like veins across its surface. The sensors detected life forms with unique biochemistry, some of which seemed to interact with energy fields in ways humans and Zerothi alike had never recorded. "This planet is remarkable," Marcus said, as they prepared to descend in the ship's smaller shuttle. "Oh, we may find species here that could teach us things no one has seen before." Liarusha felt a surge of excitement. For the first time, she was not a princess under scrutiny, nor a pawn in a political game. She was an explorer, part part of a team seeking knowledge. She assisted with preparations, checking equipment, reviewing readings, and suggesting landing coordinates based on her observations. Her confidence grew with each task she completed. The descent was smooth. The shuttle landed on a plateau surrounded by glowing flora. Tiny creatures with translucent bodies and radiant patterns scurried among the luminous plants. Responding to their presence with curiosity rather than fear, Larusha knelt down to observe one, its delicate wings flickering in soft light. "It seems aware of us," she whispered. Marcus crouched beside her. "Yes, and it is not afraid."
Wow.
That is a rare gift. Most life forms instinctively avoid us. Here, they seem trusting. They spent hours studying the ecosystem. Larusha carefully documented the interactions, noting patterns in the creature's behavior. The way plants responded to movement and touch, and subtle shifts in the air and soil. She realized that every element of this world was connected, delicate, yet resilient. It fascinated her, filling her with a sense of wonder that she had not felt since childhood. During the exploration, Marcus spoke of humanity's approach to challenges. "Humans often face impossible odds," he said, gesturing to the strange landscape. "We fail many times before we succeed, but we do not give up. We adapt, we learn, and we try again. That is why we survive." Larusha listened, absorbing his words. She had been told her condition was permanent, that her life had limitations. Yet here, in the presence of creatures adapting in ways she could barely comprehend, she felt a possibility she had never considered. Perhaps there were solutions beyond the scope of Zarathi medicine. Perhaps she had not reached the end of her story. The day ended with them returning to the shuttle, carrying samples and data. Larusha felt a quiet thrill at what they had discovered. She shared her observations with the crew, offering insights that even Marcus admitted were perceptive. The humans treated her contributions with respect, discussing theories and possibilities rather than dismissing her ideas. That night, as the ship traveled through the dark expanse, Larusha reflected on her life. She had been given to Marcus as a joke expected to be embarrassed and humiliated. Instead, she had found freedom, respect, and purpose. She realized that she had underestimated humans and in turn had underestimated herself. There was a spark within her that had been dormant, waiting for the right circumstances to ignite. The days that followed were filled with continued exploration and learning. Larusha discovered that the planet's bioluminescent enzymes had unusual properties. They seemed to react with dormant cells in ways that could theoretically stimulate growth or restoration in multiple species. She shared her observations with Marcus and the crew, discussing possibilities and ethical considerations. The humans listened attentively, offering suggestions and theories based on their own scientific experiences. Larusha felt a growing sense of collaboration. She was not a subject to be studied, nor a pawn to be manipulated. She was a contributor, a thinker, and a part of a team that valued her insights. The sense of accomplishment, combined with the awe of exploration, filled her with a quiet confidence. She realized that the universe was far larger and more forgiving than she had ever imagined. The Zarathi Watchers continued to monitor their journey, but Larusha paid them little mind. She understood that their scrutiny was a reminder of her past, yet it could not define her present or future. Here, aboard the human ship, among life forms both known and unknown, she felt truly alive. One evening, as they navigated past a cluster of small luminescent asteroids, Marcus approached Larusha with a gentle smile. "You have changed," he said quietly. "Since the day you came aboard, you have grown in ways I did not expect. You see things differently, and you inspire the crew in ways you might not even notice." Larusha considered his words. She had felt the change herself, the confidence, the curiosity, the quiet courage that had replaced doubt. "I suppose," she replied softly, "that the galaxy has a way of teaching us lessons we never expected. And perhaps I was given this opportunity not as a joke, but as a chance to learn who I truly am." Marcus nodded. "Exactly. You are not defined by what others believe you cannot do. You are defined by what you choose to do, by the courage to explore and understand." For the first time, Lirusha allowed herself to dream without fear. She imagined discovering new worlds, solving mysteries that had baffled even the most advanced minds, and perhaps finding solutions to her own challenges. She no longer saw herself as the infertile princess, a figure of ridicule. She saw herself as a being capable of growth, learning, and meaningful contribution. The human ship sailed on, gliding through the galaxy's endless wonders. Lirusha stood at the observation deck, her gaze fixed on distant stars. Nebulae, planets, and alien life forms she had encountered were only the beginning. She understood now that the universe was filled with possibilities, and that she was no longer a passive pawn of circumstance. She was an active participant in the story of life itself, and as the stars stretched infinitely before her, she felt a quiet but powerful resolve. No longer would she be defined by the expectations of others. No longer would she be constrained by fear or ridicule. She was free to explore, to learn, and to discover not only the universe but herself. The journey with Marcus and the human crew had already changed her life. The galaxy had shown her wonders, and the humans had shown her respect and understanding. In return, she had begun to see herself differently. The days aboard the human ship passed in quiet rhythm, yet something unspoken began to stir in Lirusha's heart. The discovery on the glowing planet had opened new possibilities. It's not only in understanding alien life, but in understanding herself. The strange bioluminescent enzymes from the forest had caught her attention from the moment she first touched the delicate, pulsing tendrils. She noticed how they interacted with dormant energy fields, almost as if coaxing life to awaken. Thought came to her in a whisper. Perhaps there was a way to awaken life within her as well. Marcus had been quietly observant. He noticed the way she lingered over samples, the intensity in her violet eyes as she studied readings, and the gentle way she handled alien creatures. "You're thinking about something," he said one evening, as the ship glided through. Cluster of stars, their light reflecting softly on the observation deck. Lirusha hesitated. I am wondering if it is possible, if perhaps this discovery could help me to change what has been impossible for me. Marcus studied her carefully, choosing words. "If you want to try, we can explore it together. But we must proceed with care. This is new, untested, and unknown. We do not know the full effects." She nodded, a mixture of fear and hope swirling in her chest. For centuries, she had been told that she could not bear life, that her body was incomplete, and that the expectation of motherhood was beyond her reach. Yet here, on a distant ship with a human captain who treated her with respect and a crew that believed in discovery, she felt the first flicker of possibility. The weeks that followed were consumed with research. The ship's AI assisted them, analyzing the enzymes' biochemical properties, comparing them to known life forms across the galaxy. Lirusha spent long hours in the lab, observing, recording, and testing harmless interactions with samples. Each day she learned more, and with each small success, a spark of confidence grew. One morning, Marcus approached her with a soft smile. "I spoke with the crew. We have a way to safely test whether these enzymes can react with dormant cells without causing harm. It will take time, patience, and care." Lirusha's heart leaped. "Time is something I have learned to cherish more than I realized," she said quietly. "Let us try." The process began slowly. Lirusha observed the enzymes under controlled conditions, noting how they responded to different stimuli, and slowly introduced them to tissue samples provided by the AI for study. Marcus and the crew monitored each step, making adjustments to ensure safety. Lirusha's excitement grew with each tiny reaction, a faint glow here, subtle movement there, signs that life could be awakened. It was during one of these late-night sessions that Lirusha truly began to see the depth of Lirusha. Human patience. Marcus worked quietly beside her, his hands steady, his mind sharp. "Science is often a test of endurance," he said. "It is not about rushing to results. It is about observing, learning, and understanding. That is why humans have survived against odds that seemed impossible." Lirusha nodded, absorbing his words. The lessons extended beyond science. She realized that hope, like discovery, required patience. It required courage to keep going when results were uncertain. It required trust in those around you. Days turned into weeks. Lirusha's understanding of the enzymes deepened. She discovered that the enzymes were responsive to specific energy frequencies, ones that could interact with the dormant reproductive cells present in her body. It was a delicate balance. Too much stimulation could cause instability, but too little would have no effect. Each calculation, each test, each observation brought them closer to an answer. Yet the risk remained. One evening, as the ship drifted past a cluster of distant moons, Lirusha spoke quietly to Marcus. "Do you think it will work?" Marcus looked at her, his expression steady. "I believe it has a chance. But whether it works or not, the courage to try is what matters. That is something no one can take from you." She considered his words. Courage. She had been brave before, walking the halls of the Zarathi palace under scrutiny, facing ridicule and isolation. But this was different. This was a choice she made for herself, guided by her curiosity and the support of humans who believed in possibilities rather than limitations. The day came when they were ready for the first real test. The enzymes had been refined, carefully monitored, and prepared under controlled conditions. Lirusha sat in the lab chamber, her pulse steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. Marcus stood nearby, monitoring the equipment, while the crew observed from a distance, their presence quiet but reassuring. "We cannot predict everything," Marcus said softly, "but we can act with knowledge, care, and respect. Are you ready?" Lirusha took a deep breath and nodded. "I am ready." The process began slowly. The enzymes were applied in minute-controlled amounts, their interaction with her cells monitored by sensors and AI analysis. Lirusha closed her eyes, feeling the subtle energy pulses coursing through her. It was strange, unlike anything she had ever felt. A gentle vibration, a soft warmth, as if life itself was whispering to her. Hours passed in patient observation. Lirusha focused on her breathing, maintaining calm as Marcus guided the readings and the crew recorded the data. At first, there was no visible change, and doubt crept in. Yet she remembered his words about courage and endurance. She reminded herself that the universe had always been full of surprises. That discovery often came when least expected. And then, quietly, almost imperceptibly, a faint pulse of life began within her cells. The sensors detected subtle reactions, a sign that the enzymes were interacting successfully. Lirusha opened her eyes, her breath catching. Marcus's gaze met hers, calm but shining with encouragement. "It is beginning," he said softly. Hope surged within her. She felt a connection not only to the science, but to the universe around her. For centuries, she had been told she could not create life, that she was incomplete. And now, in the quiet hum of the human ship, she felt the first spark of possibility, proof that, perhaps, she could overcome what had once seemed impossible. The following days were a careful dance of observation and adjustment. Lirusha learned to trust her own instincts as she guided the process, making subtle changes and noting results. Marcus remained her steadfast support, offering encouragement without pressure, guidance without judgment. The crew shared their own insights, collaborating in a way that felt natural and empowering. During one quiet night, Lirusha stood at the observation deck, staring out at a distant galaxy swirling in colors of gold and violet. She allowed herself a thought she had never dared to consider. What if she could have a child? What if the laughter of a young life could echo across the stars, a new beginning, born from courage, science, and hope? Marcus joined her, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You have always had the strength," he said. "You just needed a chance to see it in yourself." Lirusha looked at him, gratitude and quiet determination shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing in me when no one else did." The journey continued. The ship traversed uncharted systems, gathering new data, collecting samples and observing life forms unlike any previously recorded. LaRouche's understanding deepened, not only of the enzymes, but of the vast interconnectedness of life across the galaxy. She realized that every planet, every creature, every star had its own rhythm, its own potential, its own lessons to teach. And in the quiet moments, when the stars stretched endlessly before her, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she was no longer defined by limitations. She imagined the possibility of motherhood, of nurturing life not only as a princess, but as a being capable of love, care, and creation. Yet, despite the hope, she remained cautious. The Zarathi Empire still watched from afar, and any misstep could have consequences she could not yet foresee. She knew the journey was not only about science, but about courage, trust, and careful navigation through both space and politics. The ship's AI chimed softly, signaling a new set of readings. LaRouche and Marcus leaned over the console, studying the data. The enzymes continued to react in subtle but promising ways, their energy patterns steady and increasing in synchronization with her cells. It was progress, careful and measured, yet undeniable. A quiet excitement settled over the lab. The crew whispered in hushed tones, sharing observations and tentative hypotheses. LaRouche felt a deep sense of connection, not only to the team but to the possibility of life itself. She realized that she was not alone in this endeavor. She had allies, mentors, and friends who respected her, trusted her, and shared her vision of possibility. As the days passed, the first tangible signs of success began to emerge. LaRouche's body responded positively, and the data confirmed that. The enzymes were awakening potential within her. The realization filled her with awe and humility. She had dreamed of possibilities but never dared to imagine such tangible results. One evening, she stood alone at the observation deck, the nebulae casting soft, shifting colors across her face. She felt the quiet stirrings of life within her, subtle and delicate, yet undeniable. She closed her eyes, letting the sensation wash over her. For the first time, she felt the promise of a future she had never dared to hope for, a life defined not by limitation, but by courage, discovery, and the quiet miracle of possibility. Marcus approached silently, standing beside her. "You are not only discovering new leaf." The stars blurred past the viewport as LaRouche sat quietly, her hands resting on the console, her mind full of thoughts and anticipation. The week spent on the human ship had been transformative. She had discovered not only the potential within herself, but the depth of trust, courage, and resilience that humans possessed. Now, as she prepared to return to the Zarathi capital, a mixture of hope, anxiety, and determination coursed through her. The time had come to face the empire she had once feared, and to show that she was no longer the princess defined by limitations, but a woman of choice, courage, and possibility. Marcus stood beside her, his calm presence steadying her nervous heartbeat. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice gentle. Lyra Shaw nodded, her violet eyes fixed on the stars ahead. "I have to be. Not just for myself, but for the future. I must show them everything they did not believe was possible." The journey back to the capital was quiet but tense. The ship glided through hyperspace, each passing light year bringing them closer to the Empire's seat of power. Though LaRouche had gained confidence in herself, she knew the political storm awaiting her could be as challenging as any scientific test she had undertaken. The High Council had underestimated humans before, expecting compliance and embarrassment. This time, she intended to demonstrate the opposite: dignity, strength, and the courage to define her own destiny. As they approached the capital system, Marcus briefed LaRouche on the protocols they would encounter. "We will present ourselves carefully. You have the right to your privacy and your choices. I will stand with you, but you are the one who speaks for yourself. The council cannot dictate your life any longer." LaRouche absorbed his words. In the past, she had been the subject of endless discussions, her condition used as a topic for amusement or political maneuvering. Now, she understood that she could reclaim her voice. The fear that had shadowed her for so long began to shift. Replaced by a sense of agency she had never truly known, the ship descended into the capital's orbital docks, greeted by a fleet of Zarathi vessels. The sight was impressive, yet imposing, a reminder of the Empire's power and the expectations that had once burdened her. She kept her head high, walking with the poise of someone who had faced challenges and emerged stronger. Marcus remained. At her side, a steady anchor in a sea of uncertainty. The High Council convened in the central chamber, its walls adorned with glowing crystals and intricate carvings of the Empire's history. Delegates from every corner of Zayrath filled the space, their elongated figures casting shifting shadows under the soft illumination. The moment LaRochia entered, a hush fell over the chamber. Whispers spread quickly, and she felt the weight of every gaze upon her. But she no longer felt powerless. "You return," one counselor said, his tone laced with curiosity and subtle skepticism. "After your journey with humans, we expected. Perhaps failure." LaRochia met his gaze calmly. "I have returned not in failure, but in purpose," she said. Her voice carried across the chamber, firm yet steady. "I have discovered what many believed impossible. I have learned, I have grown, and I am no longer defined by your expectations or assumptions." A murmur rippled through the council. Some were intrigued, others suspicious. The princess whom they had used as a subject of mockery now stood before them with quiet strength, unshaken by their scrutiny. Marcus stepped forward. "Princess LaRochia's journey has shown something remarkable," he said, addressing the council with measured respect. "It is not about political games or inheritance. It is about courage, discovery, and the ability to redefine what is possible. I am here as her ally, not to command, but to support the truth of her achievements." The council remained silent, the weight of his words settling in the air. LaRochia took a slow breath, feeling the quiet power of truth in the face of doubt. For centuries, she had been silenced, her potential dismissed. Now, she had the opportunity to speak, to demonstrate her worth not through titles or compliance, but through the undeniable evidence of her courage and intelligence. Over the following days, she met with council members individually, sharing her findings, explaining the properties of the bioluminescent enzymes, and detailing the careful, patient work that had allowed her to unlock possibilities within herself. She spoke of the humans' approach to discovery, their respect for life, and the lessons she had learned about patience, hope, and trust. Each conversation revealed not only the science she had mastered, but also the inner strength she had cultivated, though some council members remained wary. The presence of Marcus and the careful documentation of her research could not be ignored. Whispers of amazement began to circulate. The princess they had once dismissed as infertile now carried with her the evidence of life potential, proof that with courage and knowledge, what was once deemed impossible could be achieved. Yet, despite the growing admiration, challenges persisted. Factions within the council questioned her motives, suggesting that human influence could compromise the empire. LaRochia faced these inquiries with calm determination. She explained her actions with clarity, emphasizing the careful ethics of her research and her commitment to the empire's values. Her voice, steady and unwavering, silenced much of the doubt. Then came the moment she had anticipated with a mixture of hope and nerves. In a private chamber, she underwent a final observation, confirming the results she had hoped for. The enzymes had worked in harmony with her biology, awakening potential that had once been dormant. For the first time, she understood that the years of ridicule, isolation, and doubt had not defined her. She had discovered the power within herself, and it was undeniable. The news spread through the capital like a quiet revolution. Courtiers, scientists, and citizens alike began to reconsider what they had believed possible. That princess had mocked now became a symbol of perseverance, courage, and the merging of wisdom from different worlds. LaRochia felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had faced the empire at the whispers, her own fears, and emerged not only intact but transformed. Marcus remained by her side throughout, offering quiet support. He never claimed credit, never overshadowed her accomplishments. He understood the importance of letting her stand in her own light. Together they navigated the delicate balance of political tension and personal triumph. As days passed, LaRusha felt the first subtle signs that the process had been truly successful. She allowed herself a private moment of joy, a quiet acknowledgement that she was no longer defined by what she had been told she could not do. Her heart swelled with gratitude for the humans who had guided her, for the life she now carried within possibility, and for the courage that had grown from patient effort. The culmination of her journey came during a council assembly where she addressed the Empire formally. Her voice rang with quiet authority, filled with the wisdom of experience and the clarity of purpose. "I was once defined by limitations," she said. I was given to others' expectations, treated as an example of failure. But I have discovered that courage, knowledge, and trust can change what is impossible into what is possible. I am no longer the princess who was mocked. I am a woman capable of creation, of learning, and of bridging worlds. The council listened, in silence, absorbing the words, the evidence, and the presence of a princess transformed. Some faces were bright with admiration, others thoughtful, still others reluctantly convinced. LaRusha stood tall, her heart steady, knowing that she had not only proven herself but had begun to shift the perspectives of those around her. Marcus, watching from the side, felt a quiet pride. He had seen the transformation unfold, witnessed the courage she displayed, and understood the depth of her accomplishment. Yet he also knew that this was only the beginning, that the true challenge lay not in proving herself, but in embracing the life she had nurtured into possibility. In the quiet hours that followed the assembly, LaRusha walked the corridors of the palace with Marcus. She marveled at the familiar architecture now viewed through new eyes. The walls that once seemed confining now appeared to reflect the strength and resilience she had cultivated. She had returned not as a pawn or a joke, but as a being of possibility, empowered by knowledge, courage, and the support of those who believed in her. "Do you feel ready for what comes next?" Marcus asked gently. LaRusha nodded, her gaze focused on the distant stars visible through the observation windows. "I feel ready," she said, "not because I am fearless, but because I now understand that courage, patience, and hope are stronger than fear. I have learned to trust myself, and I will continue to do so." The human captain smiled softly. "Then you are prepared for whatever the future holds." As the days passed, the capital buzzed with quiet transformation. LaRusha's journey became a source of inspiration, a symbol of what could be achieved when courage met opportunity. The princess, who had once been ridiculed, now stood as a figure of possibility, bridging the gap between worlds and redefining the future for her people. And within her, the quiet certainty grew. She had not only faced the Empire, but she had begun a new chapter in her life, one defined by choice, resilience, and the extraordinary potential of hope realized. The stars beyond the capital continued to shine, endless and bright, reflecting the promise of a life no longer confined by expectation. LaRusha had returned to her people not as a... The capital shimmered under the twin suns, its towers reflecting golden light across the sky. LaRusha walked through the palace gardens, the soft breeze rustling the leaves as if whispering congratulations. She felt a quiet, steady joy within her, feeling she had long thought impossible. The research, the trials, the journey with humans, and the courage to face her empire had all led to this moment. Life, once denied to her, was now a quiet, growing presence inside her, carrying with it the hope of a new generation. Marcus walked beside her, as always, offering calm support. The humans had adapted well to the palace, and the citizens of Zaroth had begun to regard them with curiosity and respect. They were witnesses to a transformation not only in LaRusha, but in the very spirit of the Empire. Through knowledge, patience, and courage, she had shown that boundaries, whether set by biology, expectation, or tradition, could be challenged and changed. The High Council had been formally informed of her progress, and while some were still skeptical, most could not deny the truth. LaRusha had discovered a way to awaken her dormant potential safely. The proof was not only in the data, but in the quiet life growing within her. Her return had shifted perspectives across the Empire, teaching even the most rigid minds that courage and hope could produce results beyond imagination. As the weeks passed, Lyrosia felt her body changing in subtle, extraordinary ways. Each day brought new sensations, warmth, movement, and quiet signs of growth. She kept meticulous records, observing every pulse, every subtle interaction, marveling at the miracle she had nurtured. Her wonder grew with each passing moment, and a deep gratitude filled her heart for the humans, for the discoveries, and for the courage that had guided her to this point. The palace staff, once distant and formal, now treated her with respect and care. They marveled at her transformation. But it was not the life growing inside her alone that captivated them. It was the way she had carried herself through trials, the way she had reclaimed her voice, and the quiet dignity with which she had faced her empire. Lyrosia had become more than a princess. She had become a symbol of possibility. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Marcus led her to a small observation deck overlooking the capital. The sky glowed with soft hues of gold and violet, reflecting on her calm, thoughtful face. Soon, he said gently, you will meet the life you have nurtured, a new beginning, born from your courage and persistence. Lyrosia's eyes shimmered with emotion. It still feels like a dream, she whispered. I never imagined this would be possible. And yet here it is. It's a chance to create life, to continue hope beyond myself. Marcus smiled. You have always been capable. You just needed the chance to see it. As days turned into weeks, the palace prepared for the final stage of Lyrosia's journey. Skilled caretakers and medical experts, combining Xerathi, knowledge and insights gained from human science, oversaw her well-being. Each precaution was taken with care, ensuring that both mother and child would be safe. Lyrosia embraced the guidance with quiet appreciation, understanding that courage also meant accepting help when needed. The moment finally arrived. Lyrosia entered the birthing chamber, calm yet filled with anticipation. Marcus remained close, offering quiet encouragement. The humans who had journeyed with her stayed outside, providing support and guidance through communication channels. Their presence felt, but not intrusive. Hours passed in patient observation, filled with careful monitoring and gentle guidance. Lyrosia focused on her breathing, her mind steady, recalling the lessons she had learned: patience, trust, courage, and hope. She felt the quiet strength of the universe around her, the rhythm of life connecting her to every planet, every star, and every being she had encountered on her journey. And then, in a moment that felt like both eternity and an instant life, emerged. The newborn's first breath filled the chamber with quiet vitality. Lyrosia held her child close, marveling at the delicate features, the tiny hands, and the soft, radiant energy that seemed to reflect her own inner strength. A deep, unshakable joy filled her heart, a mixture of wonder, gratitude, and the quiet triumph of hope realized. Marcus knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. She is perfect, he whispered. A life born from courage, patience, and the belief in possibility. Lyrosia smiled through tears. Perfect. And more than I could have imagined, she said softly. She is proof that limitations are not the end of the story. She is the beginning of something new, something hopeful. 8. Word of the birth spread throughout the palace and the capital. Citizens, nobles, and scientists alike marveled at the news. The princess who had once been ridiculed as infertile had given life. Not through luck, but through courage, knowledge, and determination. Lyrosia's story became a beacon, inspiring countless individuals across the empire to challenge limitations and embrace possibility. The High Council, once skeptical and dismissive, gathered to acknowledge the event. Some members spoke quietly of the science, others of the courage displayed. But all recognized the transformation within the princess and the hope she had inspired. Lyrosia addressed them with calm dignity. This life is not just mine, she said. It is a testament to courage, to patience, and to the potential within every being. May it remind us that belief in possibility can change not only our lives, but our empire. Her words echoed through the council chamber, leaving a quiet, lasting impression. The empire began to shift subtly, embracing a new openness to discovery, compassion, and the courage to challenge old assumptions. Larusha had not only changed her own destiny, but had sparked a quiet revolution in thought and understanding. Days turned into months, and Larusha embraced motherhood with quiet joy and humility. She nurtured her child with love, care, and gentle guidance, marveling at every small smile, every tiny movement, and every new discovery. Marcus remained her steadfast support, helping to care for both mother and child while respecting her independence and autonomy, the humans who had journeyed. With her return to their ship, leaving behind knowledge, respect, and the quiet legacy of their shared journey. They had witnessed not only a miracle of life, but the power of courage, collaboration, and belief in possibility. Larusha felt gratitude beyond words, understanding that her life and her child's life had been enriched by this partnership. Across worlds, as the seasons passed, Larusha reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She had been a princess mocked, a subject of ridicule, and a soul constrained by others' expectations. She had ventured into the unknown. With humans, learned patience, courage, and hope, and discovered the ability to awaken life within herself. She had returned to her empire with knowledge, dignity, and purpose. And now, she held in her arms the living proof that possibilities could be realized. The empire itself began to change. Scholars and scientists collaborated with new openness. Inspired by Larusha's discoveries and example, citizens learned that courage, patience, and belief in possibility could overcome obstacles once thought insurmountable. And in quiet, personal ways, families across Zyroth began to embrace hope and curiosity in ways they had never before imagined. Larusha walked through the palace gardens one morning, her child cradled gently in her arms. The twin suns shone warmly, reflecting golden light across the blooms. She paused to watch a butterfly flit among the flowers, its delicate wings glowing in the sunlight. A sense of deep connection filled her, a bond not only with her child, but with the universe, with life in all its forms. With the courage that had guided her through every challenge, Marcus joined her, his smile gentle. "You have done more than any of us could have imagined," he said. "You have changed your world, your life, and the lives of countless others." Larusha looked down at her child, who stirred gently in her arms, and then out at the horizon, where the distant stars promised endless possibilities. "No," she said softly, "we have done this together. Life is never the work of one alone. Courage, hope, and belief have brought us here." The child's soft coo filled the garden, a simple yet profound sound of new beginnings. Larusha felt a deep, abiding sense of peace. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and fear, yet she had emerged not only alive but thriving, carrying life into the future. The journey had been long, and the challenges great, but in the end, hope and courage had triumphed. And as the twin suns rose higher in the sky, reflecting light across the empire, Larusha understood that this was not just an ending, but a beginning. Her life, her child, and the empire she had influenced were all part of a larger story, one of courage, discovery, and the enduring power of belief in possibility. The princess who had been mocked now walked as a mother, a scientist, a bridge between worlds, and a symbol of hope realized. She had reclaimed her voice, discovered her potential, and given life not only to her child, but to the idea that courage, patience, and faith in the impossible could change the universe itself. The stars above the palace sparkled endlessly, reflecting the promise of new journeys, new discoveries, and a future filled with hope. And Larusha, cradling the quiet life she had nurtured, smiled with the knowledge that she had not only survived, but thrived in that the best was still to come.